Today I am painting a 48-inch by 18-inch acrylic painting on canvas. It is mainly about the clouds, very dramatic clouds with a foreground of water. I will not go over the foreground and the water right now, but as you see, I put painter's tape to define the horizon, so I can just continue painting the clouds without worrying about overlapping with the horizon and ruining that perfect line. I am using right now some Payne's gray with a little bit of just a little bit of water, and the brush is a very large, about almost 1.5 inches wide in circumference, and it has a pointed tip. It's round with a pointed tip, and it is made of hog bristle. These brushes are my go-to for big clouds because my clouds are mostly abstract in the final look. They are not too detailed. At the end, I start using a smaller brush to create details, but at the beginning I start with a very big brush, and as you can see, I am just crisscrossing, filling the canvas. Right now I am doing the darkest Payne's gray at the top. Usually for clouds it's a good idea to go dark on the top of the sky, the highest point, and then the further you go in the horizon, the lighter you go. That kind of creates a little bit of an atmospheric depth that allows the painting to become more three-dimensional. So now a little bit of white added to the Payne's gray and just blending in. I try my best not to have straight lines in this kind of painting. I am not painting a summer sky. Usually those summer skies have a little more of a gradation, which means you need to really blend and keep the lines invisible, like no transitional lines visible. In this case, I actually do want some of the transitional areas showing, and so I am adding a little bit of white with a little bit of I added a little bit of yellow to the Payne's gray, so it's becoming a little more greenish. And when I am adding a new layer that has a different tonal value, I start creating very subtle cloud shapes. If you notice that there's rounded edges where the boundaries are between the new color and the old color, I soften it with rounded edges with the tip of the brush. And I keep going lower and lower, adding more and more white, titanium white, to the Payne's gray, a little bit of yellow to create a little bit more of a not too blue, like it's still a blue sky, but see here's a little bit more green in the mix, but I soften that eventually. Just for now, I am trying to keep, at the time I thought I was going to have the mountains in the background there in the horizon, the way I outlined it, but I decided to change that outline, so those will end up disappearing. As you see, I am layering, adding a bit of blue, a little bit of white. On top of Payne's gray, I'm adding a little bit of ultramarine blue to the mix, a little bit of cyan as well. Now I'm adding a little bit of burnt umber in this case, just a little bit to the mix. I am trying to make it look very threatening and gloomy, like very stormy sky. So I am muting colors a little bit, and also I prefer not to have too many vivid colors in my painting. The muted colors sometimes add to the feeling of atmospheric, haze in the background. So I'm just layering, and as you will notice probably as this painting ends, I layer a lot and I go over it over and over, and I don't really cover the previous layer completely. I just scrub, and sometimes if the paint is liquid, like this area I put the white, it was a little too liquid, so I put it down, but I did not scrub it too much. I left it alone, the one in the center there, and I went over to another area, and I will come back to it after it starts drying a little bit, because I do not want it to be too smooth and covering the color underneath. So for now, I just added a little more ultramarine and cyan to the brush with the same whatever color was already, like some of that burnt umber, a little bit more of a yellow to the mix, and there was also phthalo green on the palette, so some of it I dipped the tip of the brush in that, and it creates this a little bit of a variation, to the cloud, that like the cloud colors. Of course, you can use any color you want. You can use, reds and purples, and you can use any color. In this case, I am not really doing a sunset, so usually that's where most of the color is added, in the sunset area. So I'm just going to be leaving it as a gloomy sky covering the sun, with just the areas that have brightness where the light is coming through, but it's not really a sunset. It's probably, just a later afternoon, clouds covering the sun. Adding a little more burnt umber with white, starting to put more and more layers, and more white, and softening that, breaking the edges. I don't want sharp edges yet. I don't want high contrast yet. I want the layers to still be soft and very close to each other in tonal values, because we're still looking at clouds that are far and higher above. So we don't see a lot of contrast. Now there is a little more contrast happening, so I decided I wanted to have a little more lighter area in that, and just softening that as I go. See, I'm adding a little more blue to that, breaking that bright area and softening it with a little bit of blue and a little bit of the burnt umber. It mutes that blue so it's not too bright, because in this case the sun isn't bright enough to create pure blue or summer sky blue. Now again, I am going in front, and as you see, the top layers at the top of the canvas are dark, and then I get lighter and lighter as I go closer to the horizon line. So now it's getting lighter and lighter, and more layers, more colors. When the paints are on the canvas, I just dip and mix different colors on the brush without really mixing them on the palette. I keep parts of that paint in little tiny blobs on the tip of the brush, and then I create a little bit of like little dabs on the canvas and then soften them. That gives an impression of a soft, fluffy cloud in the back or on top of us. And as you see, I am going lighter as I am building those clouds. I'm getting a little more white as I go, and a little more white. So now, like we have now mid-light tonal values. It's still not that light, but because of the very dark area at the top, it looks very light. So now I'm deciding to change the composition, how the dark and light areas are. This camera angle is not the greatest. It's not showing the whole, the width of the painting, but at least it gives you an idea of what I'm trying to do. So I go with soft dabs, layering, keep layering, and I use the side of that brush to blend a little bit. Usually when I am dipping the brush in the paint, I dip the tip of it, and then I use the side to blend that whatever paint I picked up. When I place it on the canvas, you see it right here. I am using the side of the brush, but I am only using, like, there is only paint on the tip of the brush. And there is more layers happening. Now I am getting into smaller fluffy clouds areas, because the further the clouds away from us, the more we will see the beginning and end of a full cloud. When they are above us, the cloud is so big we don't see the end and the beginning. We see only the texture of them. But the further they are in the horizon, we can start seeing the full, shape of the cloud, because they are so far that we can see them end to end. Still layering here. And this is something about how I build my clouds, is by layering a lot. There are so many different ways of painting clouds, and as I have not learned it the traditional way, I just kept trying to create texture. And one of the brushes I had was in my tools was very large, as I used it for faux finishing and other things years ago, and I just grabbed it and I thought, I like this texture. So now I use the Escoda brushes, the very large Lily series. I will leave also links and information in the description. So now it's starting to get better and better, like in depth wise. So now this is the point I decided I am not going to have the mountain that high in that area. So I cover it with, starting to cover it with cloud textures. And I will decide later on where I will be putting the mountain range. I find sometimes a non-detailed mountain range in the back, at the back of the horizon line, it gives the painting a little bit of a grounding block of, color, and almost like giving it some space, because the sky will be very, very busy and a lot going on in the sky. And if it connected to the water directly without something in between, it can create, because the water also is a little texture. There's some texture in there. I used a palette knife to create the water. So without something in between, in this case, I think that will create too much of a continuation between the water and the sky without an area that gives the eye space to rest. Just something in composition. When you decide on a composition, that's how, as you decide, and design it. In this case, I haven't really designed it. I just knew I wanted to have some, because of the very dramatic sky, I wanted to have a mountain range or something that creates separation. Now I'm starting to get even lighter tonal value. You see, the previous layers they looked very light, though now as we add more and more lighter clouds, you can see that they were just a mid-tonal value. Now we're adding white, and that really adding more white, and that really creates more definition, and you can see the clouds are more lighted more, so there is a little more light on those clouds. And in a way, there is no real rules when you are trying to create an abstract, like it's not really realistic. It's very rare that you see this kind of sky, so they're not always the way the sky looks. And I just create the energy that I feel when I look at clouds, and I just exaggerate that, and I just want to have that translated to, through the brush strokes onto a canvas. So it is up to you to decide how you want your clouds to look. You want them soft and calm and relaxing, or do you want them energized? Like this one will have a lot of energy in it. And the direction of the clouds also can create the energy. So now, because there was a lot of areas that were too light, as I am painting it, I realized that it's a little too light, too bright, and the two sides of the canvas are looking similar. I added a little more dark paint to put it like a little different balance to the painting. I do not like it when the two sides of the canvas or two halves are looking very similar. I like to have a little bit of different tonal values, different shapes, different weight to the colors and tonal values to make it more interesting. Otherwise, it would look, I think, a little boring. And that's part of the principles of art and design. If you're familiar with that, there is a reason behind that. When you don't want to have the focal point, let's say, in the center of a painting, it's not as interesting to the human mind when we are looking at a painting. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but these were found to be the most, like anything that has off to the side balance, like the rule of thirds or the Fibonacci sequence composition, they have a more interesting composition that keeps the brain, the human mind, interested in looking, and we find it pleasing. So I try and keep that in mind while I am designing and I'm painting. Sometimes something, I'm planning something and it changes as I paint away and adding layers. Most of my art, it doesn't really have a plan in mind other than just trying to capture, the energy and that I think that I feel when I look at the clouds in general, their power, their energy, how we look at them and we're always in awe and fascination. And this is what I try and do when I am painting clouds. And I know everybody has their own, impression looking at clouds or cloud paintings. So just follow the way you feel is going to express you and how you see things and how you feel things. Now I'm adding a little more of the dark to offset the area that was too light, adding a neutral, muted white, like lighter color, and just blending that together. And it creates more interest when you're looking at the colors layering. It creates a little more interest in textures, because those brush strokes are not too smooth. You can see the texture of the brush stroke. So now I like that area a lot better, so I'm happier with it. It's not just a dark round circle. And I keep changing things as I go. So this is going to be a while till this video ends, and I will come back and explain a few more things as we go. transitioning from big brushes to smaller brushes. These are still a size 12 round pointed brush, and that's about a centimeter wide or about half an inch wide in circumference. So it's not a small brush, but it is much smaller than the brush I started the painting with. So now this is a close-up of how I use these brushes to create details. So now you see that how there is the white paint is only on the tip of the brush with a little bit of the blue paint or the darker paint, and I'm creating more and more definition in the caps of the clouds, how they're gathering. So that's with a smaller brush. So here I just kept a little bit of close-ups here for you to see, and see how after I put the white down and then I soften its edges. I decided at the time that the corner was too dark and I wanted to soften the cloud, to soften that corner by adding more white, and I softened it into the edge of the canvas. And I try and not keep any high contrast areas at the edge of the canvas so as to keep the eye inside the painting. So this is softened, and I am just softening it a little bit with the burnt umber with white. So that warms up the clouds a little more. More definition with the tip of the brush, just creating layers and more clouds, smaller clouds in size, but that means they are further away from us. More definition and highlights. I sometimes have a little bit too much white on the tip of the brush, so when I put it down, I don't continue right away. I leave it alone for a moment, I guess, and then go to a different spot, unload more of the white, and then come back and soften that initial blob of white. So when you decide where the light is coming from, you keep all the clouds highlights in that direction. This is something very important to keep in mind. The highlights have to be all in one side of in one direction. So if you decide the right side is in the dark and the left side of the cloud is in the light, just keep those highlights all consistent. Now I am doing again more detailing. Some areas look too not defined as much as I would like them to be defined, and by adding a little more dark or light, if it's a lighter area, I darken it. It creates more contrast. And that usually is where I already decided where the focal point is or where the eye is being directed. The eye goes first to the highest contrast. So where the lightest and the darkest areas are side by side, that's where the eye goes. And so you can play with that and create more of a path for the eye to travel through the painting by creating more subtle areas that have high contrast, but not big enough to create a whole focal point, just directing the eye. So there is one example of that. I'm going to soften that area, but it will be definitely leading the eye into the painting, not outside of the painting. So softening, blending, and there it is. A little more higher contrast. Not too high, but enough to, again, lead the eye. Now I am adding areas that where I make it look like there is some sun peeking through some gaps in the clouds. So that is usually the final part of the painting. And in this part here, the mountains have been already defined where I wanted them to be. And now I'm just softening the transition area, lightening the area behind the mountains to create even more contrast in some areas, to make it look like there is a glow coming from behind those mountains where the clouds are thinner, so there will be a little more sun coming through. So just, this is how I see it, but of course you can see it in any way, you know, you prefer and like, and transfer that onto the canvas. And when you look at those clouds, like, they are not realistic. They're very stylized, very, maybe even a bit more abstract than, you know, typical clouds. And in this spot here, there is a little bit of too much of a dark, flat area. And I just barely put some lighter color on the tip of the brush, and I'm just softening some of that, just creating a little more texture that is very, very soft. And there is the defined area that is very high contrast, and that part definitely is more defined, like it's on the side of the canvas. So now you can see that soft areas, more calm areas, and now there is another, on the other side of the canvas, there is a very high energy area. And there it is. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please like, comment, and a subscription to my channel would be greatly appreciated. See you in the next video.